third for setting a screen.
Because of physical play, although Jordan Taylor just got caught with a moving screen. Izzo dying for a moving screen.
It's that dreaded moving screen.
Welcome back, everybody, to another edition of the Moving Screen Podcast. I'm Brendan Quinn of The Athletic, here with Dylan Burkhart, Hoops, Wednesday, April 28th. Dylan, you excited for the NFL draft?
Oh yeah. I've been camping out downtown for days here. I'm ready to go.
Right?
It's in Cleveland.
It's in your backyard, I know.
Yeah, I'm thankful that I don't live downtown anymore to have to deal with any of that.
You're not going to be out there cheering? Are they doing like an outdoor thing for the picks or anything?
Yeah, I think there's like a big stage set up down by the lake. When is it?
First round is tomorrow night, Thursday night.
I won't be watching.
Nick and I are recording a draft podcast tomorrow where it's going to be a person who started paying attention to this, within the last 24 hours, asking someone who does this for a living about the draft. It should be a good episode of The Beat.
Yeah, you're really going to bring a lot to that podcast.
That's the point. I'm going to ask Nick. He'll fill me in on what I need to know.
You'll have good questions.
I got big questions about the Eagles. I got questions about the Lions. Should be good. But that is not what we're doing today. Thankfully.
Yeah, we could preview the Champions League semifinal if you want to get into that too.
I think we'll pass.
All right.
On that. If we talk about that, then we're also going to talk about the new PIP format for the PGA Tour because I got some takes on that.
Everything people don't want to hear about. We got it.
But today we will be talking some Michigan hoops, breaking down off-season comings, goings, projections at in the front court, back court, and the wings. Kind of break down the roster all the way along. Talk about Devontae Jones and our projections for him if he indeed commits to Michigan on Saturday. Let's just hop into it. You want to start with Devontae? That is kind of that's the buzz right now.
Yeah, I think point guard, Devontae Jones, Eli Brooks, all the news this offseason has kind of started around the guard spot, so it probably makes sense to start there. So
let's start there. And first off by plugging, you've got a great piece that gets into film and things like that on how Devontae would fit in at Michigan. Where things stand right now, it's Wednesday at 10:30 that we're recording this. He announced last night that he will be going public with his decision on Saturday. Speaking for myself, I fully expect it to be Michigan. I think you're in the same camp. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
That's where I'm at.
I'm kind of at if it's not Michigan on Saturday, it would be maybe something falling through, whether it could be academic transcript, right? Something that happens between now and then, as opposed to it's not Michigan. I'd be surprised if it's not Michigan.
Yeah. The only reason it wouldn't be Michigan is because today's not Saturday and we don't know what could happen between Wednesday and Saturday, I would say, right? If there had been an announcement and not an announcement of an announcement, and because there was, you never know what could happen because, hey, that's recruiting.
1,000%. So we'll just do real brief background, and then I want to kind of pick your brain because I've watched some film. You've certainly watched way more than I have. But so Devontae Jones, a sturdy 6'1", 200-pound guard from New Orleans, spent 4 years at Coastal Carolina, redshirted as a freshman in 2017-18 due to academics, was Sun Belt Freshman of the Year in 2018-19, second team All Sun Belt the next year, Player of the Year this past season, played for legendary coach Cliff Ellis, who's been around. I looked up, the dude's been a Division I head coach since 1975. He might actually be the longest tenured head coach in college basketball. I don't know that for a fact, though. But he's been at Coastal Carolina for a decade plus, formerly of Auburn and Clemson. I imagine most people who listen to this know who Cliff Ellis is. Jones scored nearly 1,400 points there. He's top 15 in program history, all-time scorer. Nearly had 350 career assists. But in terms of what he has done collegiately, Dylan, I thought you made a great point in your breakdown of the fact that it's not a single picture. It's not a single portrait. He's had very different roles in each year, which to me kind of makes it both interesting and really difficult to project him out as a potential, Big Ten guard.
Yeah, for me, just because we just have the references from this year, he feels sort of like the Shondy Brown version of Mike Smith. Like Shondy Brown was a guy we took and we looked at, okay, well, he can do a little this, a little that, and you can fit him into a role at Michigan where he's doing things that he didn't necessarily do all the time, but it's what Michigan needs. Whereas Mike Smith, by and large, he was kind of that ball-dominant point guard, run the team. And I know he shot less and everything else, but the player he was at Columbia on film looked kind of like the player you would fit in. If you're going to go and say, how's Devontae Jones fit at Michigan? You're going to have to go back and you're going to look at multiple years of film. You're going to say, well, I really like this piece. Well, I'm not really sure if this piece translates right away. So the talent is there. I don't think you have sort of that crystal clear, okay, he's played the exact role that Michigan probably wants. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. But it is certainly something to kind of be cognizant about, especially because he's also playing in the Sun Belt, and it's a big up transfer, every bit as big as Mike Smith's up transfer. So that's kind of where I start with it. Is he obviously has tools. I just wonder what parts Michigan takes from his game, what parts don't really translate to the Big Ten, and then how it all comes together within Michigan's roster. That's where I kind of set the stage to start.
So yeah, and let's pick that apart. So from what you've watched, what do you like in terms of what could translate to this level, and what are your biggest concerns?
So my biggest concern is probably just how different of a type of basketball Coastal Carolina played, right? They're playing up tempo. They're playing kind of like junk zones. They're kind of going for steals. So I think you see things like he's an incredible rebounder. He gets an incredible amount of steals, and he's really good in transition. And those all tell you something. They tell you that he's more talented than everyone else in the Sun Belt. I don't think they necessarily tell you that he's going to go and get a bunch of rebounds, steals, and transition points in the Big Ten, right? Like those are Sun Belt buckets, basically, right? Like you're not just going to pickpocket guys in midcourt. It's going to be a little different. So I start there, and you kind of take that layer off. And I think even if you do that, though, there's still a lot to like about his game. So I think his sophomore year, their point guard is like a 6'6" guy who's kind of their playmaker, got hurt. And Devontae Jones was basically the full-time point guard, ran 10 ball screens a game, looked pretty good doing it. He passed more than he shot out of ball screens, which I think is usually a good indicator as far as what Michigan's going to want out of that role. So he has that in his game. And then this year, he kind of just slid over off the ball and was more of a slasher, kind of driving guy, just get his buckets within the flow of the offense, less than the every possession creator. Michigan wants more of that 2020 version where he was the guy running the show, because that's the skills Michigan needs from him, even if it's in a medium-sized role. So that's probably where you'd look first, is that, okay, he can do that. It's just a little uncertain because he didn't do that in this last year.
One of the things that was so hard to calculate in how Mike Smith was going to translate as a passer facilitator at Michigan was the lack of talent around him at Columbia, right? Mm-hmm. From what you saw at Coastal, especially in that 1920 season, when he was making maybe more reads and stuff like that and trying to set guys up, what was kind of the caliber of player he was with?
I mean, I think relative to the league, they were a lot better than Columbia, right? Like Columbia was like the worst team in the Ivy year after year, whereas Coastal Carolina has been a top 200 team each year he's been there. So they were good enough to be effective offensively and play. Some things, though, like turnovers, he turned the ball over a lot. But if you look at Coastal Carolina, turns the ball over a lot every single year. So it's kind of, again, like, is that a product of playing with a top 50 tempo and a bottom 50 turnover rate? if you're in that system, you're probably going to turn the ball over a lot. So some stuff like that I look at as a potential, like those could be improved in a better system, asked to do a different role. So that's kind of where I start. I think the biggest concern is probably going to be that he's a 6'1" guard, and I don't really trust his jump shot. It looks funky. He doesn't really hunt it out. And I don't see him shooting like 40% or anything like that. I think he's kind of a career 32% 3-point shooter. I'd probably set the over under right there. And I have a hard time seeing him shoot better against better competition.
And he's a career 32, 33% 3-point shooter who looks like one.
Exactly.
Like
Shawnee Brown was the opposite. Shawnee Brown was a guy who never really shot it well, but I thought his shot was pretty, like, it looked great right from the start. And he shot 40% on long twos, and it was like, okay, you could turn this guy into a 40% 3-point shooter. I don't really see that here with Devontae Jones.
I don't know where he learned that jumper. That is one funky looking shot. He kind of looks like Eli, but even a little bit more flat footed and a little bit more hunched. It's kind of a wonky looking shot. And he just kind of like chucks it a little bit. Like it's got a little bit
like
of
a
that,
push.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of more off the bridge of his nose than over the top of his head. One thing that jumped out to me in going through those comments that he made to 24/7 yesterday, he said, coming from where I'm coming from, I never thought a guy like Juwan Howard would want me at his school running his team. He told me he wants me to come in and run his team. So, look, I think when we look at the dynamics of what Michigan has in its backcourt and what it means to bring in a guy like Devontae Jones, it can make things, I don't know. I'm not sure how this actually plays out. And I think that we've had this conversation about, like, what do they need in the backcourt? What is the best case scenario for a body? Like, do you really want someone who you're not positive, right, can come in and be your lead guard? You give him the ball, you get behind him, the young guys can learn underneath him. Like, this guy could get here and not be as good as the freshman, just based on trying to project his jump from the Sun Belt to the Big Ten and trying to project these highly touted guys making the jump to college basketball, right? What's best case scenario of how that plays out? What's worst case scenario of how that plays back? Eli Brooks did give them a buffer by deciding to come back. Like, if you take Eli out of this, bringing in Devontae Jones, no brainer, right? Like, no brainer. But him coming into this picture, I just think it's not as cut and dry. Like, yeah, this is definitely what they need. So what do you think?
So Eli Brooks is not a point guard. And I've said all sorts of positive things about Eli Brooks' game. If you are trying to build your roster to be the best it can be next year, it involves Eli Brooks playing 85% of his minutes at the 2 guard, in my opinion. Can Eli Brooks cover at the point guard for spells? Yes, and he'll do that well sometimes, and there'll be games where maybe that's not such an ideal look. Saying that and saying I don't think it's a viable long-term plan to say we're just going to make Eli Brooks our point guard if Frankie Collins struggles. I think that's too much risk, and you have all this, we'll talk about the front court later, but you have all this talent in the front court. It's not going to be here forever. I think you have to understand that you need reliable guard play if you're going to make the most of that. And I don't think that Eli Brooks at point guard is just a high upside offensive plan. So then you're looking at, okay, is Frankie Collins a starting point guard? Even if he is he going to play 35 minutes a game? I don't think having 2 point guards is a crime against Frankie Collins or Devontae Jones. I think that it's a little bit of insurance in a spot where you really need it. And the sort of hybridness to Jones's game means it can maybe help you get away with different lineups, right? You could play him at the 2. You could play him with Eli, and maybe it's sort of an on-ball, off-ball situation. Like, I think his game complements the other pieces on the roster fairly well when he's on the court.
So, yeah, I mean, and because you're right. If Frankie Collins, for all we know, Frankie Collins comes in and is plainly not ready to be a point guard, a primary point guard at this level, right? I mean, we've said it before, the reliance on freshman point guards in the Big Ten, it's a very short list of guys who've had success. So I think when you look at it that way, it's fair to say.
Yeah, and I would use Andre Curbelo as an example.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, probably going to be a preseason All Big Ten player next year, or close to it. One of the best freshmen in the Big Ten. He had 101.8 offensive rating, a 25% turnover rate, and shot 16% from 3 as a freshman. And he's really good, and we love his game. But he was a backup, and if he was starting and was the go-to guy and wasn't playing next to an All-American, what does that look like? And I think that's just kind of where you have to set the stage for what can a point guard do as a freshman in the Big Ten.
Sure. But what is what I was trying to get at is like, what's that fine line between bringing in someone who is a serviceable point guard, right? Who comes in and maybe is looking to split time with a Frankie Collins, right? Or you know what I mean? Kind of be a piece as opposed to a like primary. I'm coming in, I'm leading I'm looking to play 30, 32 minutes. You know what I mean? Like, because that's the sense I get here. You know, you're talking about a guy who played 30 minutes as a freshman, played 33 minutes each of the last 2 years. That you just don't want to backlog things in the backcourt.
If you're getting a guy who's hoping to play 15 minutes a game, he's not very good. I think you want to get someone who's good enough to play. And I don't think, I'm sure if you go back and look at whatever Sean D. Brown said when he transferred, it wasn't, man, I can't wait to play 18 minutes a game off the bench for Michigan.
I'm pretty sure it was, I want to come in and do whatever role they're asking me.
Okay, but either way,
right.
I don't think you can assume because Juwan Howard told Devontae Jones he wants him to run the team, which doesn't mean play every minute for the record. It means play point guard. That it means he doesn't understand that there's other players on the roster and he's just going to throw a fit if he doesn't win the job. I think Devontae Jones projects more as if you were going to set like an outcome curve, more of a rotation piece than a lock to be a starter, in my opinion. So I think it will be an open competition. I think it'll be, I could see it being close to a 50-50 split with kind of how those minutes shake out. And I don't think that's a bad thing. And I don't think that quote says that it wouldn't work either. Yeah.
I mean, I think the biggest, it's an unfair precedent, but to me, like one of the biggest selling points on Jones is the fact that Juwan Howard has proven that he can watch film on dudes and have a pretty damn good idea of what is going to translate and what is going to fit, right? Like that's because as, some dope who just goes to these games and writes stories, I look at trying to project this guy out and I kind of talk myself in circles because I remember once upon a time, I thought Jerron Simmons was for sure going to, step right in at Michigan and be a high quality point guard. And then I was totally wrong on that. And then I thought Mike Smith was probably going to be a bit of a bust or not really play out anything close to what he did. And I was completely wrong on that. So, maybe I'll just keep my takes to myself when it comes to Mr. Jones.
The way I'd put it is I thought for Michigan to be its best last year, Mike Smith just absolutely had to start. I didn't see any other way that team could work. This year, I think that it's more about, okay, you add Devontae Jones into the mix and you have a blend of players that can work together. I'm not sure there's a every minute type of guy like Mike Smith. Like even as we go down this whole roster, I think Michigan is going to be a lot deeper this year. And I don't think there's going to be as many guys playing 35 minutes a game like we saw last year. You don't have players you can just pencil into that sort of role other than Eli Brooks, really, right? So I think that you're going to see it be more just that's I don't think that we can say Juwan Howard necessarily wants to play a short bench all the time, as much as that's just kind of how the rosters he had his first 2 years set up. And I think with the talent you have on this team, you're going to have to play guys. And I think I don't think Juwan Howard has left guys on the bench who could play, if that makes sense, right? I think he played as many guys as he trusted each year. And I think there's more guys on this team that'll be capable of playing kind of that baseline level of minutes.
Right. Yeah, the crunch of bodies is something else.
Is it though? So let's just go 1 and 2. So you have basically 4 guys for 2 spots.
I'm saying I meant on the roster as a whole,
Okay.
like just generally speaking. But yeah, let's go through this.
So you have Frankie Collins, Eli Brooks, potentially Devontae Jones, and Kobe Buffkin. That's
at the one and the
and
two.
Zeb Jackson at the 1 and the 2.
Right.
I think 4 of those guys are your rotation.
So you said Eli, Frankie, Devontae Jones, Kobe Buffkin, Zeb Jackson.
Yeah. So you have
Right.
5 guys for 2 spots. I think your rotation ends up being 4 guys for 2 spots. Because I don't see a super sub like Sean D. Brown who can play 3 different spots, right? I think you'll have more focused subs by and large.
I would tend to agree, and it's probably worth saying where, anyone listening that says, where does this leave Zeb Jackson? I think the days of Zeb Jackson as a potential point guard are probably fading, and he's been, it will eventually kind of get slid more to a off the ball guard as a shooter. How that actually plays out, I have no idea. But if anyone's asking, like, why doesn't Zeb Jackson be a potential point guard? I think I don't see that happening.
Yeah, if Michigan brings in Devontae Jones, keeps recruiting a point guard in 2020, 2, and brings in Frankie Collins, like, the writing's kind of on the wall there. And it's kind of a make or break year for Zeb Jackson. I mean, he's 6'5", he can do some things on the court, but it wasn't a great freshman year. And I don't know, that's the one spot where I have a hard time finding where he fits in, because I really like Frankie Collins and Kobe Buffkin's games, and somehow you're going to have to find something in there. What do you think? Go ahead.
I was just going to say, for people who haven't watched the freshman that much, so Frankie Collins, more of a lead point guard, Kobe Buffkin, more of a scoring off the ball guard.
Yeah, Frankie Collins, I would say sort of a Xavier Simpson vibe, just with like highlight dunks. And Kobe Buffkin is a 6'5" guard, real skinny, really good out of ball screens as far as being able to pull up from 3, get to the rim, make plays as kind of a secondary ball handler.
Lefty.
Yeah, for me, he's a guy who, like, the Kobe Buffkin season you should get really excited about will be his sophomore year. Like, I think he plays this year, but I think he has like all Big Ten potential as a sophomore, as everything kind of comes together.
That sounds right to me.
What do you think of Frankie Collins' game?
I mean, it's all the pieces are there for a pretty dynamic college player, for sure.
Except the shot.
Except the shot, and except the fact that it takes, like, young point guards in the Big Ten, you just don't see it. You just don't see it. So it's so hard to, like, put any unfair expectations on this guy as a freshman and sophomore. I just feel like people would be setting themselves up for disappointment that's pretty undeserved, right? But, like, if you look at what could be the whole of Frankie Collins' college career, a guy who's going to come in and work on his shot and learn to be a point guard and learn to make reads out of ball screens, right? And start to kind of understand himself and his game and his athleticism. Like, the potential of a 3-4 year career, I think is pretty high level. Yeah.
And that's the thing. When you recruit these guys are so talented that once you get to the upside, it's going to be gone in a flash, right? So it's all about getting it at the right point in kind of the growth curve and finding that game. I just think what you just said, though, it's unfair to put those expectations on him. If you don't bring in a guy like Devontae Jones, that's exactly what you're doing. You're saying basically, okay, run the team 30 minutes a game. What do you got, kid? And that there's going to be games where he struggles, like as a freshman point guard. That's just part of the course. How many freshman point guards at Michigan over the last decade have turned out really, really good and struggled as freshmen, right? Like Trey Burke was great, but look at Darius Morris when he came. He was supposed to be the guy who changed Michigan's entire program, highest rated recruiting program under Beeline and all this, and then really struggled as a freshman.
If you weren't bringing in Devontae, I'd say that like the ceiling for Frankie Collins would be Derek Walton freshman year.
But see, that's unfair though.
I agree. And that's a year where he had multiple guys, pros, he's playing with the Big Ten Player of the Year. I was only saying in terms of like, he was only asked to just get Michigan into its offense. Right. And
then stand in the corner and hit threes.
And he was a guy who as a high school player did a lot of what Frankie Collins does, right? Downhill, ball handling, playmaker, right? Those would probably be the three words you'd use to describe Frankie. And so if you weren't bringing in Devontae, that's all you would really be. That's the extent of what you'd be asking for this kid, for Frankie this year. But I do agree with you though, that by not throwing him into the pool, you are at least kind of allowing him to mature.
Yeah. The Walton situation is so different because he was such a good 3-point shooter and he was able to play that role. And he was always a good shooter. So I don't think that was like a surprise that he shot it well that year. But you also had 2 6'5" playmakers on next to him who could do anything and hit threes.
Well, I mean, okay. And in this case, he's going to be playing with the Big Ten
with Hunter Dickinson. Yeah.
Freshman of the year, Player of the Year candidate in Hunter Dickinson and a couple of potential pro prospects in Diabate in Houston, right? Like, it's not like he's walking into some scrub ass. Not like he's going to Northwestern.
I'm just saying the lack of, it is not like he's going to Northwestern. The lack of a consistent jumper makes it really hard to just stick him in one of those off-ball roles. Because that would be perfect. If you had a point guard who was coming in who could just shoot, then you say you don't have to do anything. Just run the set and do everything. Like that. That's basically the Eli Brooks break glass in case of emergency point guard, is just get him into the sets and then play off the ball and space the floor for high-low game, for Hunter Dickinson inside. And that's still there, and that'll be a part of what Michigan does. I just think Devontae Jones, Michigan's been so ball screen reliant, and it gives you at least another body who's a proven guy who can play out of a ball screen. And I don't think you could go through this offseason and not find that.
You want to get into the wings?
Let's move up. So are we going to say, I guess really just the three, because this is like the new world of
positionless
basketball, but it's getting more positioned. So at the three, we're looking at what? Caleb Houston, Terrence Williams, Isaiah Barnes. Who else are you throwing in this mix?
I mean, Nunez is still on scholarship, so you have to mention
Adrian Nunez.
Right. And Williams is interesting in that he's kind of still a hybrid three. He could still get some time at the four. Like, it's really weird when you look at that, like 4-3 kind of this whole part of the conversation, because like, if you look at the forward, to still use that word, like Diabate, Terrence Williams, Brandon Johns all need to play, right?
I would also.
So if you could turn Terrence Williams into more of a three, like maybe there's some more minutes for him there, because I do want Terrence Williams to play.
I would also say Caleb Houston's best college position is the four, and I don't think he'll play that based on what we just said about how the roster sets up. But to me, he's basically ideally suited for that Isaiah Livers role of mismatch four who can space the court. I mean, the only way that really comes to be
3-4 on offense doesn't really make a difference. Can he defend a four?
Yeah,
like a true
3-4. I think he could. That he played that role a lot, and I think his length and size. He's not the quickest. He's a good defensive player, but he's not like a guy who you're going to put on some jet quick wing. He's more of a bigger kind of methodical guy in a way. And it's more about his length and ability to contest shots. So anyways, at the 3, I do think the way this roster sets up, it's all lining up for him to be your starting wing and play that position. Do you agree with that?
You're talking about Houston at what would be the 3 in air quotes. Yes. With Barnes being his first reserve, or do they play together?
Terrence.
And Terrence, right.
You mentioned Terrence, I don't know what to make of his freshman year. Clearly a lot of trust from the coaches, I would say. They threw him in some pretty key spots, despite the fact that he shot it very poorly all year. And I think he brings you toughness, defense. He doesn't really have a position on the court. I think to be the player he kind of sets up to be, he just has to start making threes, in my opinion, and the rest would kind of come. And I mean, he certainly has the confidence to take them. So I don't know.
So, I mean, yes and no. He's like the guy I would love to get, the truth serum into Juwan Howard and say, what do you project? What does he look like as a junior senior to you, more so than this year, right? Because what he projects to as a junior senior probably speaks to how you use him this year a little bit. But you could certainly make the case that if you have, the guards that we already went through and Caleb Houston as being, an elite shooter at the 3, you could play Terrence Williams at the 4 as a rebounding, defending, kind of that junkyard, David West type dude, go in, get rebounds, score on putbacks and do this stuff. And then also be able to hit that foul line jumper, right? It's okay to be who you are. Yes, in a perfect world, he's able to step out and hit threes, but if that's not his game, and if Juwan is not going to ask him, right, to turn into that, then you don't worry about it.
I mean, he got up 14 threes. And how he took almost as many threes as 2s. It's clearly he's clearly going to shoot those.
Well, wait a second though. Does he want to be a 3? This is the thing with anyone who's over 6, 7.
You see his trigger. He wants to be a 3-point shooter, man.
Now, everyone over 6'8" wants to be Dirk, man. It's always been that way for the last 10 years. But if that's not his, how many of those 14 did he make? 1. Thank you. So maybe he's not a 3-point shooter.
I'm referring to the confidence with which he took them, which was elite, 100th percentile. For me, there's a lot of – I see the player that he could be, but there are a lot of kind of roadblocks to get there. He could – the undersized big thing would really work, but he doesn't have great wingspan. He doesn't have great athleticism, and I think that ends up actually – I think Juwan Howard makes lineup decisions with defense before offense, yes. And I think that starts pushing him down into that mix at the 3 because I don't think he can really contest around the rim to the extent that you would hope. E.J. Liddell is only an inch taller than Terrence Williams, but his arms are a foot longer, and that's the difference, and that's what makes E.J. Liddell so special at that position, and that's what I worry about with the ceiling. Same thing as with the shot. You go 1 of 14, that happened. Aby Watson, I think, had something similar as a freshman. But the 55% at the free throw line, that's a little scary, right? So all of a sudden you're saying, well, what exactly is he going to do? And he can fit in and play defense at multiple positions. I thought even positionally, he was pretty good when he was out there. He'll rebound. He's tough as all hell. So he's the guy you want to play.
Good passer.
Yeah, good elite post feeder. I just don't see – I don't know what the best case scenario is. Like you said, what is he as a junior, senior? If he cracks into a starting role, I'm not exactly sure. And there's just so much traffic ahead of him with guys who would play similar spots who at least have a special skill set in one way or other. And he's sort of the jack of all trades, master of none.
Right. We're having this conversation while just kind of spacing over. It seems like Houston and Barnes. All right. So Caleb Houston, guy's a McDonald's All-American, 6'8", wing, forward, whatever. But he also reclassed, right? 22, 21. I don't know how old is he?
I don't have that off the top of my head.
I would ask you, give me the tempered, right-minded level of expectation for Caleb Houston.
For me, Caleb Houston is probably the most boring McDonald's All-American player you'll ever see. And I mean that in a good way.
Right.
I did a cut up of him from the Geico Nationals. And like, obviously it helps to play on a really good team. I think he made like 16 baskets. He dribbled twice before any of the shots. He's basically the perfect off-ball spacer who knows how to play a specific role and who knows how to play within a pretty advanced concept, right? Like that's the one big benefit I think of playing at a place like Montverde with a bunch of other really, really good players is you can actually play closer to a college role and be used to that. Like he just fits a useful offensive archetype in the college game. And most guys have to say, okay, I did this in high school. Now I have to rediscover how to play in college. Houston, I think he's going to shoot a lot of threes, and I think he fits that mold. So that's where I'm at with Houston's game. I don't think he's not like a highlight guy, right? Like he's got a sort of basic game. The guy comparison I'd use is like Cam Johnson at UNC a few years ago. Just a lot of threes, good length, can get the shot off. Maybe he doesn't shoot it that well. Like I don't think you can expect like, oh, he's going to shoot 45% from three like Isaiah Livers, but he's going to shoot a lot of threes, and I think he'll have games where he makes a lot of threes.
Going to create some matchup problems for other teams where they're going to want to be able to defend his shooting with some length and probably won't have that luxury with a lot of the lineups that Michigan's going to be able to put out there.
Yeah, and we talked like Michigan was really good defensively this year because of all that length, and he brings some of that along for the ride, even though you're losing Livers and Wagner on the wings. So
we think they're losing Wagner on the wings.
Okay, well, yeah, we'll just have to tear this podcast off and do another one. But yes, Franz Wagner has not declared for the draft, but
it would be very strange if he didn't go to the draft. He's still widely projected as a top 20 guy. But it is April 28th, and he has not declared for the draft, and he's not responded to messages. So who knows what the hell's going on there? But the longer it goes on, you do kind of scratch your head. But I think we would still both be shocked if he were not in the draft. So, and it would also be news for somebody on the current roster who would need to give up their scholarship. So, but I heard Jace Howard's dad's got some coin. So, Isaiah Barnes. Chicago kid, right? One of the crazy things about this freaking freshman class is you got players from Ontario, Paris, Michigan, Chicago, Minnesota. I'm leaving one out. Nevada. Kind of all over the place. And this will probably be what you get with Juwan Howard, I would think.
Probably means Michigan will lose every in-state rivalry game because they don't care about the rivalry enough by recruiting the state. Is that right? Write
that column, baby. So Isaiah Barnes, 6'7" wing, kind of versatile scorer, got some handle. Simeon, right? Simeon.
He transferred to Simeon this year. Yeah.
Give me your projection on him.
Not boring. I think he's basically. I think it's been harder to get a great feel for his game just because it's sort of like he played at, I think it was Oak Park. It was like not the best competition as a junior and put up big numbers.
It's kind of the problem you run into with Max Christie a little.
Yeah, I think they're both suburb leagues where you don't really know what to read.
The difference, Barnes played EYBL, right? And
Barnes played no, he also played Illinois Wolves.
So he also was on Under Armour, right? So not at the highest level of summer ball, which is so
you also can't just throw on like Jalen Suggs played Under Armour. He turned out all right. Like you can't just say, oh, because they didn't play EYBL, they're not real. But
it's more just the difficulty of projecting is what I'm saying.
By all accounts, Isaiah Barnes played really well this year at Simeon. He projects as really elite athlete as a 3-and-D wing, in my opinion. I don't know. I haven't seen enough of the playmaking. I haven't seen enough of him playing at Simeon this year, so I'm not really sure. Like that seems like a down the road thing. But I mean, crazy athleticism, looks like a good shooter, has all the tools. The question has always been like, can he produce consistently and at every level? And so that's just what to see. If there's a guy who I think surprises from this class, it seems like it would be him. And honestly, there's kind of a roster need for him more than you would think at first glance, right? I mean, I don't think there's another, like, you need more shooting. You need some more wing athleticism. Like, he kind of could slide in there.
That's the word I would use, yeah.
So,
especially because you're talking, you look at Houston being more of a spot up. He's not running, flying, going over people doing, Terrence Williams, obviously, we've seen him play, that his style of play. Well, like you do want someone who can go, catch a screen, catch a back screen, go get a lob, do stuff like that. This is where you're getting that.
Yep. So I don't know. He's probably one of the harder ones to see where he'll be at when he steps foot on campus, but I do think that his role and skill set fits nicely. And it's I think there's kind of a natural progression where he'll kind of be able to be that understudy and maybe play his way into the rotation as the season goes on.
How much, if at all, give me number of possessions next year, we see a lineup of Frankie Collins, Kobe Buffkin, Isaiah Barnes, Caleb Houston, Hunter Dickinson.
Oh, you're including so you're not all the freshmen, just the freshmen with Hunter.
I'm gonna leave Hunter Dickinson on the court. Thank you.
I think it'll be really low because of Eli Brooks and Devontae Jones. Like, one of them is going to be on the court, and I think that's kind of why you bring in a guy like Devontae Jones, right? Like Eli Brooks is going to play 35 minutes a game, so there's not a lot of possessions for your little freshman lineup there.
Sure. Okay.
So low number. What are you going? Do you have like a magic number ready to go?
No, I don't know. I think there will be times that, whether it's just to do it, that he would maybe roll out all 5 freshmen as kind of a nod to history, right? And kind of get the buzz going and stuff like that. Like,
I actually like the lineup without Hunter. So you go small with Houston and Diabate, and then you go with Collins, Buffkin, Barnes at the 1, 2, 3. That actually is a lineup that gives you something different that I think is kind of intriguing. Whereas just cramming the other freshmen in with Hunter doesn't make as much sense to me.
Right. I mean, Dickinson's playing 33 minutes a game, though.
Well, that's less than Eli Brooks.
Okay. So the forward spot, I kind of went through that a little bit. This would be the air quote 4. So Diabate, Brandon Johns,
and T. Will,
Terrence Williams, Will Cheddar.
Oh, and Will Cheddar.
Right.
He's in the mix there. He's
in the mix, and he's a hard one to project, right? I mean, it's the level of ball that he's played. Who knows? But he could certainly be someone who gets in there and starts. If he's making buckets, like you said, if you can play, Juwan Howard's going to play you.
Yeah, there was very real questions for Cheddar about defense and whatever else, but if you need sort of a mismatch 4 to give you a couple buckets, like that, maybe that's a role. But again, so many bodies at this kind of combo forward spot that it's hard to really see that. I'm going to put you on the spot. Day 1 starter at the 4, Brandon Johns or Moussa Diabate?
My heart says Diabate.
Your heart.
I want to see the kid. If you're going to have Brandon Johns on this team, right?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like, especially early, you want to give him that shot. So I'll say Brandon Johns.
Yeah, John starting also lets Diabate back up both spots.
I don't know what starting Diabate gives you, right? Other than making Brandon, sending Brandon Johns into a bad mental place. So give me Brandon, and I don't say that lightly. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I got you.
I'd rather try to build up Brandon Johns than try to build up first day Moussa Diabate.
Where are you at with Brandon Johns? This is the most
look, I mean, the end of last year was the end of last year. That wasn't fake. That happened, right? And Diabate is still pretty raw. I mean, he's 6'10", and he's got all this skill, and he's got all this length, and that's great. But just projecting him to walk in and suddenly be a day 1 starter I know he's a McDonald's All-American and all that, but that's still a big jump. Brandon Johns has 3 years of college strength and conditioning, 3 years of experience. He got that injection of confidence at the end of last year. And if he can defend, rebound, protect the rim, score, dunk, get out in the open court the way that he did down the stretch last year, he looks like a guy who should be playing 24 minutes in the Big Ten.
Yeah, so I think the strides he made on defense late in the year were real.
Yes.
I don't know how much they were a product of matchup, and I think there are still bad matchups for him defensively. I don't think those bad matchups are going to be any better for Moussa Diabate, though, in the same sense. I think there's way more upside to what Moussa Diabate can do from that spot and what he can – like, I think Brandon Johns can be a really good defender. I think Diabate could be like a team-changing defender for Michigan on that side of the ball. I think it makes complete sense for Johns to start at that spot because of you want Diabate to be able to replace Hunter or Brandon, right? Like you don't really have a backup center. Like there's no Austin Davis to be just that 5 guy. And I think that's a good thing. I think that you're going to have to play a different way when Hunter Dickinson's off the court this year. And I think that's going to be a net benefit for Michigan. Like if it's Diabate, you're going to just switch everything and do this. If it's Johns, you have maybe a pick and pop guy, right? So I think that's actually intriguing and can make Michigan a little more versatile. I just am not quite sure what like Brandon Johns late in the season offensively, opposing game plans were let that guy beat you.
Yeah.
And that you really want to go into a season without a let that guy beat you in your starting lineup. And that's what I'm worried about from an offensive perspective is when Johns did some really good things. He had some good moments where he scored in the post. He got putbacks. He does this. He's also an automatic guy to double off of. And I think you're kind of scheming with one hand, like at least partially behind your back from the get-go. And that's what I worry about with Johns, just like if you're going to say he's a full-time starter. I think he's got to be a piece of the rotation, but really this problem goes beyond him, though, because you're going to have a non-shooter at the 4, and that's just going to change kind of the whole offense and what you're going to get. So it's not just a Johns thing. It's more I'm really curious to see how that impacts what Michigan does next year and what it looks like.
I was going to say, so 2 points. One, it's not as if Diabate is some highly evolved offensive player, right? Like if you put him out there, it's going to be the same thing. Teams are also going to say, let this guy beat us, right? So, but you asked where I am on Johns, and one of the issues that still is just kind of there is, as it has been for multiple years, right? In a perfect world, Johns can play 2 positions, and that's how he gets to 22, 25 minutes, is that he can back up Hunter at the 5 and he plays minutes at the 4. But it has been an issue to have him play 2 positions and be fully comfortable in both roles. That's been a thing. So, does it magically come together as a senior? I don't know. I mean, he has a lot of experience. The guy's probably played I don't have it in front of me. He's probably played 90, 100 college basketball games now. Ideally, yeah, he can give you minutes at both. But if he again proves that he can't, now you have to decide, right? Okay, well, he's a 4 then. Because he's not going to,
I think Diabate at the 5 is probably more intriguing. Again, you're asking him to potentially play 2 positions as a freshman, which who knows? But I don't know. Like the 2 position thing seems to be more of like a Brandon Johns thing than anyone else playing 2 positions.
Agree.
If that's like a fair way to put it.
And also, like this isn't us. We're not just making this up. Like this is this has been the conversation inside that building for multiple years.
But what I keep looking at is, okay, we're talking about who slides up to the 5, who plays how many minutes at the 4. At what point do you start considering a slide up from the 1, 2, 3 to cut into Brandon Johns minutes? That's the X factor, I think, for all this. Caleb Houston moves to if Isaiah Barnes or Kobe Buffkin is too good and they have to play and they give you more, I think Caleb Houston fits in really nicely as a small ball 4, and that's going to be just there as an option all season. I think I guarantee I'll be writing something about that in like December as a potential option, because then all of a sudden you can go big, you can go smaller. Like, I just think that has to be an option with how this roster sets up. Or Terrence Williams, like all those guys are in that mix, and they give you something different and a little more perimeter oriented than Johns or Diabate at the 4. And that's just kind of where I'm at, is like, do you have that in the back of your pocket?
But so many of these decisions are going to be made on defensive liability versus defensive upside.
And a lot of teams play a 6'6" guy at the 4. Like, so that's part of the equation too. I think Michigan's roster is deep enough and talented enough that you can mix and match and go defensive. So the one thing I'll say is Juwan Howard's more likely to match his lineups defensively to what another team does than create an offensive mismatch. And that's flip-flopped from John Beilein, I would say. Like, right. Beilein would play a shooting 4 at all costs because it would be harder for the other team to guard. He didn't care if the other team, if like that 4 guy was really that good defensively. I think this is the opposite. And that's why Johns played so much in that NCAA tournament, because he was really good defensively and brought more length. So all this is the way.
Would you be worried, like if you're going with the experienced lineup, right? The experienced lineup is Devontae Jones, Eli Brooks, whoever at the 3, right? And then a Brandon Johns and a Hunter Dickinson. Like, how worried are you about spacing offensively in that look? I mean, because Devontae Jones as a 3-point shooter, you can sag, you can play off of him. Even with Frankie Collins, you can play off of him. But that idea of having Johns, Dickinson out there together, how worried would you be about spacing?
I think that's a real concern. I think there are ways to get around it, and teams play 2 bigs. Like, this is probably the best offensive rebounding team we've seen from Michigan in decades, but still, I think it's a concern. And I think you look at what if you go Jones, Brooks, Barnes, if he's good enough to play, Houston, and Dickinson. That's a lineup much more similar to the way Michigan played this year. And right. I think having I don't think you have to do one all the time, but I think it's going to be, you're trading something off either way.
Yeah.
And I think Dickinson is the X factor, and we should probably just talk about him a little bit because he's the potential All-American, potential whatever. Like, we're an hour into this podcast and we're just talking about him.
We're getting there. We're getting a big close. We closed with the Big Ten preseason player of the year.
He gives you a lot of flexibility, and we can talk about how there's a trade-off, like there's a playoff guy maybe in certain lineups, but Dickinson's a play 2 guy every time down the court, right? Like, you have to build your defensive plan around what he can do, and most teams don't have that. So that's a great starting point, and that's going to, Juwan Howard has a whole offseason to teach Hunter how to go the other way and to draw up ways to leverage him. So that kind of hovers over, and that's why you have to go get a guard. That's why you have to get the most out of this lineup, because you don't know how long you're going to have Hunter Dickinson on your team, and there's not going to be many more productive college players.
Right. And part of your offense has to be geared around getting him the ball, and you need guys around the perimeter who can make that pass and are able to make sure the offense is going that way, right?
Mm-hmm. And I think you saw Michigan get to a lot more high-low stuff late in the season, and that will be a big part, I think, especially when you add more size. Like, if you had Diabate, like, you have so much size in those lineups. You can do some really different things. And I went into this year writing about how is Michigan going to possibly play defense with Hunter Dickinson playing 30 minutes a game. After the year, I'd say he was the key to Michigan's defense being so good. Like, that was a huge shift. And the fact that you're still going to have so much length around him, I think this team should be really, really good defensively. That's a huge floor for this team, right? They're going to be one of the best defense teams in the Big Ten, hands down.
Yes. Everyone has talked about, Dickinson developing, going to his other side, his offside. The other thing you're going to see is I think they're going to want, or do they give him the chance to show that he can hit a pick and pop and hit a shot, right? I mean, that's one of the, I think that's just as important as him being able to develop going to his offside is maybe not just as important, but probably to him and him wanting to show off what he's going to be as a pro. They want him to be able to pick, pop, and show that he has some range. I'm going to say over under 38 3-point attempts next year.
Attempts.
So
that's like one a game?
No, not makes. I'm not saying. Yeah.
I'll go
attempts.
I'll go over.
Okay.
Here's my hot take. Hunter Dickinson makes more threes than Brandon Johns next year.
That is a take. Okay. And not that outlandish.
No, but
it's a good take. Yeah.
I think he'll make threes. I think you're going to need him to make threes, kind of to make the other pieces of the offense work. I still think it's more important that I'm writing a bunch of player kind of wrap ups for next week. And I did this chart of basically Hunter Dickinson, when he turns his right shoulder, is like the best, both based on like volume and efficiency in the country. And then he's like the worst and when he turns his left shoulder. And the fact that those splits are that jarring, like we all saw that, but it's really staggering to see it compared against everyone else in the country. And that made, I think that he was so scoutable, right? It's just so easy to overplay that hand. He just has to find that some kind of counter move. And if he finds that, I think really, I don't know how teams are really going to stop him. I guess the only worry would be it wasn't a tendency. It was like all or nothing. And that makes you a little worried that it'll be harder to address it.
Mm-hmm. Here's in terms of projecting out those are great numbers, by the way. In terms of projecting out what is a reasonable number for Dickinson to expect in terms of those 3-point attempts. So Teskey as a senior, the year he played under Juwan, he put up 65 threes in 28 minutes a game. If you just remember back like to what Teskey kind of did in that year, I feel like that's probably a reasonable.
Yeah, he'll get to like 50.
Reasonable look, yeah.
Especially
like probably
because
38 as the over-under is probably a low, especially just considering how many freaking games they could have.
Yeah, the postseason was canceled that year too. So that's a low number. And then this year, shooting numbers are all messed up. So I have all these like benchmarks of 100 threes or whatever.
55. Yeah.
50 seems like the right number.
Agree.
I think he'll get up around that. I thought he'd take more threes this year though. So
me too.
I mean, he hit them pretty consistently at the math of his senior year. So obviously it's different when you're in high school and whatever else, but I think that will be part of his game. I even posting workout clips of him knocking down NBA threes in open gym. So, I mean, he's halfway there, right?
Probably the better comp year for Teskey would probably be his junior year, because that was the first year he actually took threes. He didn't do anything as a freshman, sophomore, and then he took 77 as a junior in 37 games. That's probably the comp. So in terms of the rotation behind him, do you think it's just, whoever, it's just Diabate, or do you think Brandon, what?
I think
Austin Davis decides at the last minute to actually use his sixth year.
Austin Davis comes from but I think it's Diabate.
You know what? I do think that there's a chance that Davis isn't on the roster, but still checks in at the first media timeout.
Comes from the third row of the stands, rips his outfit off. I will go with Diabate. I just think he has just more potential as a defender. He's not necessarily like, there's going to be weird matchups and whatever else, but his length and shot blocking, he's not like, when I've watched him at IMG, he's not always a great shot blocker. It's really his ability to switch and guard on the perimeter and guard multiple spots that's really intriguing. And having being able to go from Hunter Dickinson as a kind of drop coverage big who anchors the post to Diabate as we'll just switch every ball screen and be fine with it. Like, that's scary. Or being able to put both of them out there and just dominating around the paint. Like, there's a lot of options there. And I like Diabate way more as a defensive player early in his career than an offensive player. His offensive game, like, if you watch the highlights, he can do everything, but he's sort of the opposite of Caleb Houston, where he's still figuring out what he does best. And like I feel like in high school, you can do a bit of everything. And then when you're a college player, you need to be really good at one or two things. And like, that's your role. And he's kind of in the middle of that, experimenting with all these different things he can do. And it's great to be able to do everything, but I'm not sure what things he can do consistently at a college level. All right. So that's my concern with him offensively. Like, he can make jumpers, he can face up and spin and finish and do all like incredible highlights and flashes. And that's what the pro potential is. But what does he do in a consistent, efficient way offensively in college? I guess we'll just have to see.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I guess go big picture here for a second before we get out of here. Like, at the end of the day, we project all this out. They're still, assuming Franz is gone, they're still going to be losing 4 of their top 6 scorers. Their returning roster combines for 124 career starts. For a program that's relied on some experience, that's a decent amount, but not that many. So what do you kind of think in terms of, I've seen Michigan as high as a preseason top 5 team, seen them in the top 15. Like, what's kind of your April projection for where this thing actually stands in the national picture?
It's hard to gauge now. I think top 10 sounds right. I think they should be competitive for the Big Ten title. Like, they're in that mix. I don't know. I wouldn't stack rank teams at the top of the league right now because there's still some uncertainty, but right. I think there's a really high floor and a high ceiling. I think the floor is basically based on the defense and based on just how dominant Hunter Dickinson was. And the ceiling is, man, you have some really some of the most talented kids coming into the Big Ten this year are going to be on Michigan's roster. Do they all realize that? Is it too many young kids at once? I think there'll be more hiccups, right? Like, the last 2 years, Michigan has kind of came out of the gates just kind of rolling, I would say, early in the year, where they were experienced, prepared, knew exactly what they were doing. I think there could be some rockier moments in November and this year. Like, they're going to play Kentucky. They're going to play out in Vegas. Like, they're going to play some good games and maybe lose. But I think I think there's enough talent on the roster to really get to a contending team by the end of the year.
I agree. Yeah, I think projected to be a top 3 team in the Big Ten and a top 10 team nationally is probably very fair with what this thing looks like. I think Eli Brooks coming back raised the floor significantly for me, right? Of like, if you got into take Eli Brooks out of here, I think it's a lot easier to get into okay, what could go wrong and get to a lot of bad places quickly. You know what I mean? But Eli having that rock in that backcourt, I think raises the floor to it's hard to see this being a bad team.
Yeah, Eli, and if this Devontae Jones ad happened, that's insurance in a way. Because if you were saying, okay, well, it's going to be Frankie Collins, Kobe Buffkin, Caleb Houston, Musa Diabate, and Hunter Dickinson. Well, then I'd be like, well, man, there's a lot that can go wrong. You need to hit 4 for 4 on those freshmen. Mm-hmm. Now you have an insurance policy. Basically, you have some room for everyone else to come together. And I think that's really the key, because you are losing a lot. I think what would you say your biggest concern for Michigan is with how the roster's set up?
Point guard play and 3-point shooting.
Yeah, I think it's the spacing and shooting that it'll be the biggest test. I think of Juwan Howard, Howard Isley, how they run the offense will be really interesting because of that because you had that free square basically with Isaiah Livers 6'8" shooting 40% from three for 2 years. It's going to be different, and that's what I'll be curious to see how it all plays out.
Yeah, I mean, like Isaiah Livers, Mike Smith, Shawnee Brown, Franz Wagner, like guys just spaced the floor, made a lot of threes, took a lot of threes, had to be defended at the 3-point line. That's gone. In terms of the off season here moving forward, in terms of potential news, anything that could like be popping up, what are your expectations? I think it's pretty settled now, right? We went through the coaching carousel and the staff still intact. That's pretty notable because if you would have asked me going into the NCAA tournament when the carousel started spinning, I would have said very unlikely that would be the case. But here it is, April 28th. Everyone's still on board. Franz's status is what it is, but I think he'll eventually go. I think, it's probably safe to project Juwan eventually having a contract extension announced. Beyond that, it should be pretty quiet around here. Do you agree? What do you think?
Yeah, could you see adding a transfer shaking anything loose as far as a transfer out? I don't know. Like that'd be the one thing.
I feel like we would have seen it by now.
Yeah. And I mean, so I feel like that's probably overall a pretty quiet offseason. I think.
Maybe Devontae Jones coming in makes somebody start thinking a different way. That's certainly plausible. So yeah, maybe you see a deep reserve guard start to look, but. Yeah, I mean the fact that it's this late, anyone that was that eager to go, I think would have went when Eli decided to come back.
Yep, that's fair. And how do you look at it this COVID year? So it's free for everyone to come back this year. But now are you considering a guy like Devontae Jones, who would potentially have 2 years to play, or Brandon Johns, who actually now has another year? Do you factor them into the next roster? Like, I'm really curious how that's going to be handled kind of across college basketball, because it's this weird sort of in between where everyone has this extra year, and it was obvious this year, but now going forward, it kind of clouds everything, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I think those guys would be looking to be grad transfers as much as anything else. It would kind of almost go back to the way things were previously, right? Where you would get the guy who redshirted a year early, now has the grad transfer option. I think that would be, it's going to feel like that, I think. In terms of future planning, no, I think Devontae Jones, I think that's very much a 1 year situation. You're talking about a guy who already is declared for the draft, right? So he's already looking ahead. The odds of him having any inclination of playing 2 years of college, 2 more years of college basketball, I think is completely unlikely. And we talked offline a little bit about, the guy from Georgia makes no sense to me, because why you are bringing in a guy to potentially be in front of Frankie Collins as a sophomore doesn't make a ton of sense. And if you bring in a guy like that who is academically and playing wise a junior, well, like that's 2 years right there, right? Devontae Jones is a 1 year guy, period, end of sentence. So, no, I'm not carrying over much of this into that 22-23 roster.
Yeah, because I think this summer will be like even this team to an extent feels like a little bit of like patchwork, right? As far as a transfer, as far as Eli Brooks, like it's going to be really interesting how like is it every year bring a transfer in sort of thing for Juwan Howard, or that next year's roster could be all like really 21 kids coming back for their sophomore year and 22 kids coming in, which is just going to be interesting how that turns over. And there's going to be a lot of decisions you have to make recruiting wise for that team, where you're really going to be potentially looking at another big class coming in. So that'll be something to keep an eye on this summer when things start really heating up. And it'll be interesting. Like, how does that affect your guard recruiting? How does that affect it's just something to think about.
I've seen some stuff on social about, I think it was kind of like fans being worried about Michigan developing a rep of bringing in dudes to play over their highly regarded freshmen. Do you put any weight on that?
I don't.
It's
not like it'd be one thing if you bring in Marcus Carr,
sure,
or some like a literal like guy that you're counting on to be an all Big Ten guy. I really don't think. And also, like, Frankie Collins is really good, but he's a top 50 recruit. He's not a McDonald's All-American. He's not like one and done. He's not in mock drafts or anything like that. It's not like you brought in Cade Cunningham and then brought a transfer in. He's expected to play. I think there's still minutes for him to play. I think it's an overreaction and just people kind of living pie in the sky of, oh, well, this guy's a 4-star freshman, so he's going to be incredible. I think you have to be realistic with how you build the roster. And I think like this could be, I think I would give Juwan Howard a pretty good grade if this is how the roster turns out for this year, as far as figuring out how to bring all the different options together with a relatively quiet offseason.
And having no one transfer out. I mean,
yeah,
how many programs in the country can say that? And when you have the freshmen that are coming in,
I really thought like
there's a lot of reason for guys to go, right? And I think it says something to what is built there in terms of the feel, whatever word you want to use, culture, whatever, that they have going over there.
Yeah, I was really surprised by that. And I don't think transfers out mean a bad or unhealthy program necessarily, but it's just remarkable that there haven't really been any, despite the fact that I think there are guys you could say certainly be candidates to transfer based on what's happened.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, you can make a case for any of the, we'll sit here and speak glowingly about a Terrence Williams or what Brandon Johns could do as a senior or whatever it might be. Like, but if you told me, Terrence Williams decided to go transfer to someplace on the East Coast and, he wants to go get, be guaranteed 25, 30 minutes, I'd be like, yeah, that makes a ton of sense. You know what I mean? So you're right. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's, oh man, people leaving says something about the program. It can just be guys, everyone's looking for the best opportunity, and you could certainly make an argument that that's not, just given the influx of talent, that might not be the case for a lot of guys here. So, all right. You got anything else?
No, let's wrap that up.
Mega Michigan pod here. All right. We'll do the same on Michigan State. So make sure you check out that episode, which will be coming next week, I believe. And I guess that'll do it. Well, we appreciate everyone listening. Wish everyone good health. Hope everyone's getting those needles in the arms and getting us back to the other side of this thing. So thanks a lot. Be sure to tip your bartenders and your servers.